Welcome to Dil Ki Recipes. This is such a special episode because this covers an area of work that is very close to my heart. The need is so phenomenal, and the number of practitioners in this area are very limited. And yes, I'm talking about marriage. I'm talking about South Asian relationships of all kinds of sorts. And my guest here is a very, very special person. She is skilled in couples therapy. Jessica, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I am good, Jessica. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me on this podcast.
I'm excited, albeit a little bit nervous, but I definitely am excited about all the information we're going to share today, and I'm going to learn. It's going to be great.
I am so excited, more excited than you probably. So, Jessica, you have a PhD in family therapy. You have been in the profession for almost a decade and a half. You've worked with high risk families, you've worked with successful families. So, you've worked on this spectrum, and you and I have trained together in so many spaces. And one of the things that piqued my interest in talking to you is I get asked these questions from a lot of my non-South Asian colleagues about the culture and culturally informed. And the last time we were having this conversation, the questions you were asking were, man, like so intense and so pointed, which just told me I need to have this girl on our podcast. And you work with the South Asian community in your practice. You help individuals, you help couples, professionals. And so I cannot wait to delve in this topic.
Yes, I have some great questions today. They are hard questions. So I mean, I think we're going to be covering some topics that are probably a little uncomfortable. And I think that's going to help me become a better therapist when working with the South Asian culture, because I really do want to know what is a great question to ask and what questions are safe to ask and what's an area that may not be comfortable. I think when we had this conversation earlier, you said the balance between, remind me again what you said,
balance between creating safety so they don't exit the process instead of the natural inclination that we have in the therapeutic process to push those limits so people have a chance to rethink.
Yeah, because I think a lot of these South Asian culture, they're coming in relatively new to therapy, right? So they're already coming in a little cautious and a little hesitant. I don't want to scare them away, but there is work we have to do.
Absolutely, Jessica, and I love it. And I think that's what one of the major reasons they get motivated to come to people such as yourself. You are very familiar with the Latin Hispanic community. So there's a lot of common ground. And later on in this podcast, I would love to discuss those commonalities as well, because there is the difference in the culture, but a lot of the familial values and positions are so common that I think it is phenomenal that they have somebody like you that they go to. And I will tell you that everybody listening, especially if they are a non-South Asian therapist, this is a very dynamic, successful population. They are very, very strong in their academic resumes. The emotional intelligence, the relational intelligence is a little compromised for many of us because we are so performative in that career space that mental illness in many of those groups is still or going for counseling is still stigmatized. And you and I have talked about some portions of the Hispanic community being similar. Welcome to Dil Ki Recipes on your favorite social media platform. Hi, I'm Dr. Sheeza Mohsin, executive coach, relationship expert, and your coach in this virtual space to support you and your Desi family in America. If you identify as being a person of color, a minority, and having some form of bicultural identity, a major goal of putting this information out is to help you realize you're not alone in this journey. If you identify as a Desi with cultural roots in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and surrounding areas, trying to meet your life and relationship needs and desires while embracing some beautiful elements of your cultural heritage, Dil Ki Recipes is for you. If you don't identify as a Desi, but have a warm, loving, human being kind of disposition and you want to better yourself, I think you'll find some good stuff in here as well. So let's go on with the show.
So right off the bat, I'm going to ask a hard question. What makes South Asian relationships unique? Or what makes them come to therapy? I guess that's two questions.
So those are very interesting perspectives for me. What makes a South Asian relationship, and this is, people from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, we have a lot of cultural common ground. It was the same country about less than 80 years ago. There's a lot of cultural values we are very loyal to. So the relationships are unique because many of them are still very loyalty based, just like the rest of our family dynamics. So you could have somebody that you're in a bad relationship with, but you don't necessarily leave them, which we're very proud of, that, we don't give up on our family. And so it sometimes makes marriage also hard. What makes it beautiful is the same element, where it is truly sickness and in health, that there is a level of loyalty, there's a level of commitment. The other unique element I feel is that there is a little bit more emphasis on both families. So the culture says you get married to the family, not just the boy or the girl. So when there is a selection of a partner, there's a lot of investigation and noticing the family dynamics if they match, because, it's a spectrum from conservative to liberal. And if they fall similar, and the subcultures are so evolved that there's a preference for people from the same subculture or same faith or same cultural religious denomination or common language. As you know, unlike many parts of the world, so in America, English, Latin cultures, Spanish, there's one language. In India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, I would say major languages would be like more than 30, 40, and then there are so many more. So, there's a language barrier, there's a cultural barrier. So there's a lot of subcultures coming together, which I think makes it even within that community difficult if they are cross-pollinating.
So you said that loyalty, right? And then the expectations is that you go into the marriage with loyalty because your family has done a lot of research and put a lot of energy and effort into finding the right match, or a lot of work goes into establishing these relationships ahead of time. That sounds like a lot of pressure to make it work.
Jessica, it is just the beginning of pressure. It is a lot of pressure. Marriage is becoming very complicated now. And I will give you a cultural perspective, and you might see it in your practice. I see it in mine. So traditionally, I think in society also, not just the South Asian culture, but now more so prominent in the South Asian culture, there were very gender-based roles. So the man is the provider, the woman is the homemaker, right? And so you go from that position. What was happening was that women, even if they were working outside of the home, they were responsible for all the house chores, because traditionally it's a woman's job. So she is raising the kids a lot more. She's cooking a lot more. She's cleaning a lot more. She's responsible to take care of the in-laws when they come visit. Pressure is an understatement, and that begins at the time of the engagement or when the families are coming together. So all these expectations for women, as an example. Now, what is happening is the wheels are turning for women globally, and in the South Asian culture is no different. So now you have women who are making more money, have more successful careers, because remember, more women are graduating now from college than men. And so it is becoming so different because the gender expectations are shifting and the marriages are so confused, because the boy whose mother, who may be from an older generation, Gen X boomers, is telling him, well, it's her job. And she's saying, no, it isn't. It's our job, especially if I'm working outside the home. So the marital model is changing, the gender roles. So there's a lot of pressure internally and externally for men and women, because they're both going through these changes, not knowing how to deal with them.
Okay, so let's focus on the guys and the pressure that they're kind of having to navigate. So what are some of the biggest pressure that Desi men face when it comes to marriage and identity?
So I'll tell you, there are a few pressures. It's funny because with all the, which I'm very happy about, all the women's empowerment movements, the Me Too movement being big in South Asia right now. There's a lot of, the atrocities that happened with women that were, conducted by men are getting a lot of highlight. What is difficult for men is the good men are going unnoticed. There are lots of them, and they are committed to their marriages, and they are doing it the right way. They are supportive. They're going unnoticed. The pressures, there's so many, but I can come up with 2 or 3 that I think I see a lot in my space. I see socially in community because I work in all those spaces. One of the big ones for the men is balancing their role in their relationship versus with their family. Because a lot of these boys have this caretaker position where, especially if you're an older boy or the responsible one, you get elected to be the man of the family, not just a house. So balancing your mom's wishes against your wife and your children, and always doing that dance of prioritizing time, resources, money. So they feel very spent, and they feel like they are working in all the spaces and nobody's happy. So that's a big one. The second one is, while the younger millennial men are growing, and some of them, they're going through regular things like their careers are not taking off. Because remember, South Asian cultures are the model minority cultures, just like the East Asian ones, right? Their income is at par, if not more than the Caucasian income in statistics. So while that statistic is great, it doesn't work for everyone. So the men who are not making mucho money, but they're emotionally intelligent, they are smart, they're compassionate, they're actually the kind of men, the dynamic, career focused, successful women are wanting, but they get a lot of heat and judgment for not being the provider. They get a lot of shame, almost indirect, for not having their worth attached to their money, because that's the one place that it shows up. So there's a lot of expectation dynamic changing in that space. The third one that I notice is that men in our culture, and I think men globally, but a lot in the South Asian culture, do not have the permission to be sad, to be vulnerable, to emote. So they don't have safe spaces. They can talk about cricket, they can talk about politics, they can talk about the stock market, they can talk about business, but they cannot talk about, I'm struggling in my marriage. I have a very difficult time trying to manage my mother's expectations. So those are like taboo topics.
Do you see them wanting to talk about those things? Like, do you see a willingness to explore those? Because those are definitely issues I would highlight and reflect as a therapist. But would that scare them?
I would love for you, and this is my bias to you, whether they're wanting or not, this is a story I tell myself. If they're sitting in front of you, they want to talk about something because they haven't experienced that space of safety, of somebody normalizing for them that, they can have a sucky day and they love their mother or their wife, but the multiple truths that the person you love could also be your biggest pain in whatever body part. So the multiple truth model is not as understood unless you go in therapy, right? Where you could say, I love my mom, I'm so loyal to her, but man, she gives me such a tough time. I would like to believe they're craving for that space.
Would it be okay to highlight or reflect when there's some, I don't know if I like this word, but I'm going to use it, some traditional masculinity or toxic masculinity keeping the conversation from moving forward?
It's so interesting. And I'll be very curious when you share some examples with me. I feel that there are a couple of things that I would recommend saying to them when they are delving in that space, because they feel very judged, right? We are a very performative culture. Typically, we glorify everything that comes from our countries. We are like very patriotic in our presentation, very code switching in who we can complain about the culture in front of. So when they're starting to do that, I would invite you to say something like, I know you care for them a lot. I know that's important, but this is also another reality. So they know that you're not thinking they're a bad person. Like the first person, they will initially, a lot of times, not everyone, be performative in front of is you. They want to please you also as a therapist. I see it all the time, and I have to tell them, okay, I'm not your mother. I am not somebody who you should care about. I'm here to support you. And it takes a few sessions for them to finally let go. And then is when true therapy happens, because they can actually unload somewhere and actually notice their feelings and not even realizing that they were feeling all of this.
Okay. It is safe to point it out if they're kind of being stuck by traditional values or traditional expectations, I guess is a better word.
I would say with the South Asian population, my recommendation always to non-South Asian therapists is overdose on compassion, because as a culture, oh my goodness, Jessica, expression and love, I see so much in the Latin culture. We are not, as a culture, expressive in loving. We love criticizing. We have a PhD in criticizing. But, maybe this is limited to my exposure of the Hispanic community. I see the criticism there too, but I see a lot of abundance of love expressed there too. We don't have that. That love is very limited. Very few families and people are comfortable. I remember being very loving, expressive. By nature, I guess I notice things. And so I'm quick to praise. And one of my friends comes to me and says, and I was back home, she's like, you sound desperate. Why do you have to keep praising people? And I just looked, I said, that was not my intentions. Like, oh my God, you don't need to say these nice things. I'm like, okay. Because for a minute, I was like, oh, I think it's not culturally well received. And I've been living here for so long that you start picking on those things.
Is it possible to over-index on compassion? Are they going to get scared because it's too new and it's uncomfortable? Like, oh, someone's praising me.
I know. So I usually recommend that you keep checking in. say, is this working for you? What is a little too much? What were the topics that were a little too much? Because I want to make sure I pace at your speed. Because the other problem is that we're not a profilable community. Everybody's so different. If you meet someone who's more conservative and practicing in their faith versus if you meet someone who's moderate versus if you meet someone who's liberal, huge difference. Socioeconomics. I have understood that socioeconomics are a lot more common ground than any culture. You know, when you can spend in the same way, you have a lot more in common than the cultural element. So I'm curious to ask you, Jessica, talk to me about the South Asian population as you see it, as you work with them. What are things that are intriguing for you and things that you don't maybe get or are wondering about?
Well, I like that you highlighted that it's very diverse, even amongst the culture, right? There's some general things that can be generalized, but then there's things that are very unique to your client, and keep checking in and keep asking and pacing. Let them lead the session. I think that's important to highlight.
What is something that you feel you notice they're uncomfortable with?
Feelings, a lot of feelings. Sometimes, like you said, the women are coming in and like, hey, I want to talk about my feelings. You're not seeing me, you're not hearing me, you're not noticing me. And the men are being like, well, I'm working and I'm providing and you have a really good, comfortable life. And like, that should be good enough. And they're like, but it's not. I need more. I need emotional connection. And so then the men are kind of confused.
I see an equal bucket because I work with a lot of dual career couples that the emotional connection is craved a lot. I also notice in my traditional couples where one is working inside the home, one is working outside, the woman is definitely, the wife is craving that emotional connection. A lot of times the husbands are craving intellectual connection. They're craving a lot more intelligent conversations than they can, or, shop talk that sometimes they cannot do with their partners. And I'm wondering if you see any of that.
Yes, but that also, it kind of comes across as a threat. These men do want intellectual conversations until their wife actually makes a smart point, and then they're kind of wrong. So do they? That seems confusing in part for the woman.
I wonder if it's like a global universal thing about men not liking to be wrong, because it definitely is a thing. I know that there is fragile ego, a lot of fragile ego there. So absolutely, there isn't that element. And then also there is a relationship which is very complicated in our culture, and it's the mother-son relationship.
I was about to ask about that because you're talking about these men don't want to meet their, this is harsh. I'm not trying to be harsh, but it seems like they struggle to meet their wives' emotional needs, but they're really good at meeting their mother's emotional needs.
Absolutely. So a lot of times it stems for the dysfunctional couples dynamic in their parents' generation, right? So mom was not, it's still that provider mentality. And so dad was not there emotionally. It's an intergenerational enmeshment in so many ways. So mom did not get the affection that she was looking for from her husband. Well, guess what? She recruited her son at age 7 or 8. He becomes mom's advocate. And as a result of this, mom gives him so much special treatment. There's a lot of grace and a lot of forgiveness and a lot of treats and whatever preferential treatment. So when I do family therapy, I come across this a lot where siblings, sisters, and brothers are like, the older brother is always the favorite because the older brother and mom have this dynamic. So they're so tuned into, and in our therapeutic space, it's called a surrogate spouse. So you find a lot of that. And so when they're already doing that with their mother, it's very hard for them to manage unless they're in therapy or figure it out on their own, which is very rare, that just continues with the mother. There's no space for the wife. And then, that also impacts the couple's dynamic in terms of closeness because they're getting very biased. They're built to not meet resistance because mom is getting a need met. So mom puts up with a lot of behaviors. Mom will enable a lot of dysfunctions. So there you have this man who is used to a woman agreeing with him, feeding his ego. And then wife comes and says, you haven't helped out. I have kids. I haven't slept. You're not doing anything in the house. And it's like so contrary to the unending praise that mom gives. So that just creates a lot of complication in that relationship.
Okay, so what you're talking about is that wives end up competing with their mother-in-law for emotional space.
Absolutely. That is one of the most complicated things. A lot of times the mother-in-law in those dynamics is the other woman. And so
is that okay to highlight if that relationship dynamic is showing up and it's problematic? Because I know In the Hispanic culture, we talk like the mother is almost revered. She's a patron saint. Like, is that okay to highlight that?
Well, and I would love for you to maybe consider highlighting that and coming from your place of culture. Just go gentle. Usually, in my experience, by the time they come to therapy, they're realizing that there's something wrong with the dynamic. They don't know how to pinpoint it. They feel very bad when they resist. They feel guilty. They won't feel as guilty with disappointing their wives as they will feel guilty disappointing their mothers.
Oh, walk me through that.
I know I've said something which, but it is true. It's like such a thing. I want to make sure that I'm acknowledging that not all mothers are like that. But in those spaces where mothers' behaviors, and Jessica, I had picked this up from you, where the mother's behavior is problematic, is in those spaces where there's a lot of subtle programming and grooming and guilt tripping that happens. So the mothers who show this problematic behavior have a victim story. The victim story includes sacrifice, all that they've done, enunciating all these things, how they gave up so much to make sure this child was raised well, given the preferential treatment. And so anytime he's choosing his wife, it's a betrayal. So that grooming gets tested the moment he gets married or is in a relationship.
Starts very young, that mindset.
It happens so young that by the time the guys are working with me, they're in their 30s and 40s going, oh my God, I did not see that coming. Oh my God, I did not notice my mother like this. What I work on is that you can love someone and still set boundaries. Nobody's perfect. So the model that I come with is that imperfection. None of us are perfect. Your parents are also limited with what they know. So you have to manage that because now you know better. So the hope is that you will do better. So it's very complicated. And usually I like recommending, and I do that, is dabbling in that space once you have built trust and an alliance, once they know you're in their corner. Otherwise, it just becomes, a lot. What are you noticing in your practice? Because you have a steady flow of South Asian clients.
What am I noticing? The biggest difference, I think that is the role of the mother-in-law or the mother in trying to decide where loyalty lies. Are you still being loyal to someone if you're recognizing that their expectations are too much? Or are you being loyal if you're prioritizing your wife over your mother, and what are the repercussions of that? And then from the daughter-in-law's perspective too, am I being a bad person by asking my husband to prioritize me over his mother?
South Asian men don't realize how much this sabotages their sex life because they are not emotionally connecting with the partner that they want intimacy with. And then the partner is feeling very depleted and used because they're keeping the emotions for another relationship, and they want the objectification or that action, which then is a lot more emotionless or limited.
Well, that's a great segue, because like as a trained family therapist or couples therapist, there's like topics, there's just automatic topics we have to cover, right? It's finances, it's family of origin, it's death, it's parenting, and sex. Is sex a safe topic to talk about with South Asian couples?
My first response as you were saying that is, I think hardly anything is a safe topic. Is it a necessary topic? Absolutely. I feel like sometimes they come with the hope that you will ask them because nobody else does. It's such a taboo topic.
Walk me through the reason sex is such a difficult conversation to have.
I wish there was one answer. As I understand it, sex is stigmatized a lot. Like many faith-based societies, the goal was just procreation. So the idea of pleasure is alien. As people are growing mature in those relationships, and as people are evolving in that community, it's less taboo, but there is definitely, I notice, inequities. Most of the time, something that is talked about as a man's need. So women become invisible in that space of pleasuring and being taken care of. For example, it's a man's right to ask for intimacy. But if a woman does, it's strange, or she's judged or shamed if her libido is higher. There's almost an equal number of marriages where that is the case. But when you sign up for that loyalty, you know that this is not something your partner can outsource without other consequences. And then the whole idea, it's It's shamed. Those things are considered, sex porn would be considered the same thing. Intimacy is special, that connection is special. It's not looked at that as openly. And that has its own set of problems in our culture.
So sex is not something that's like playful and joyful, and you can't be really curious about it.
Yeah, that's such a sign of safety if you're able to talk about it. Of course, when I talk about this, I'm not talking about the liberal cultures within the South Asian diaspora, but the moderate to conservative, that's like a thing you don't comfortably talk about.
Well, then you use the word liberal, and walk me through liberal, because I think even that spectrum of liberal is different. You're saying liberal from a very traditional, just explain liberal a little bit more. I think your idea of liberal is completely different than my idea of liberal within the context of this culture.
This is just how I understand the South Asian community. Liberal in their limited practice of whatever faith they follow, which means they're more secular. Liberal or conservative in their social issues and how they look at society. Open-minded versus rigid in what they follow in terms of understanding people. And also open-minded or conservative in their dressing. And why have I separated that? Because a lot of times you will notice some people will be very liberal in their dressing. You will notice people from that culture dress moderately or in a modern way. They'll be wearing Western clothing. Maybe there's a little bit more skin showing, all of that. But the mind could be very, very different from that growth and that open-mindedness. And by that, I don't mean being okay with drugs and alcohol. No, it's basically being open to the idea that people are different and not necessarily wrong, that a perspective could be different, that there is modern thought around a woman's sexual needs or how they look at the LGBTQ community. All of those are different spectrums. That doesn't mean they're not nice people, but very limited, rigid thoughts. And so you would have to poke in different places before you classify it. I'm actually trying to work on an assessment that would just make it easier, especially for therapists to understand where they are, because religiosity may show up differently. For example, in the Muslim culture, there will be a person who wears a scarf, a hijab, and eats what is called the halal diet, which is, the animal being slaughtered a certain way, and are very, very practicing in their faith, follow that. Then you'll meet the person who wears a scarf, no problem eating any kind of meat that is not processed the Muslim way, because they were raised abroad in the Middle East, because, eating that kosher thing is a lot more South Asian in its tradition. A lot of the Middle Eastern families, a lot of Arab families, a lot of the multinational Muslim families don't have that requirement, but people who come from that culture and also practicing Muslims who follow a lot more of the traditional belief follow that. So some of them would be wearing the scarf, have an amazing sense of humor, be very liberal in their thinking, be very kind and very okay with supporting kids from any community and being there. So you cannot say, okay, just because this person wears a scarf, they're a certain way. Or if this person is wearing a mini dress, they're a certain way. So the mind, the religious, the body, the presentation, like all of that is so complicated, which makes it a difficult population to work with. I don't know if that's helpful, but
I think it's amazingly helpful. And it's not that it makes them difficult to work with. It's just, it's going to take a little bit more time. Maybe we're taught that therapy is a process and it's pretty prescriptive, right? And so when you're getting to know someone of a culture, you have to take the time. So therapy might look a little slower. Is that the right reflection?
Absolutely. And Jessica, I will tell you, this is such a powerful space where you're working with this population, because we definitely need so many people to support the growth, because now we're finally breaking through. My platform has gotten so much positive feedback. If I would have launched this 10 years ago, it would be shut down and nobody would even think about it. Providing that safe space to this population for therapists such as yourself, being curious to be culturally informed, so you are not saying something that will shut the therapeutic process down. So the more culturally competent you are and aware you are, and even if you're aware that you don't know, is so powerful, because then you're not making assumptions. You're not letting biases feed into how this person may look like. So for example, an Indian lady wearing a sari and wearing a dot on her forehead. Well, you would think she's very traditional. Wait till she opens a mouth and you find out that she has the highest level of degree. She is so open-minded. So you cannot let the dress code dictate how a person is going to be in terms of their intellectual growth. And so, there are many, many nuances and complications of the culture that could present a certain way, but then when you meet the person, you're like, oh my God, they're definitely not like the stereotypical people. And you do stereotype just to make sense of something, but to make sure that we're aware of those biases and we know how to ask questions in a culturally competent way versus burdening the client in giving you a few sessions of multicultural education on their culture before you can help them.
Yeah, so have some information ahead of time, but also be open to whatever they're willing to share and teach you.
Yes, and that curious position, it's like when they tell you, well, my family is from Andhra and my family is from Mumbai, very different cultures. My family is from Gujarat and my family is Telugu speaking. That's like North India, South India. Very different cultures, very different foods. Just being curious, writing down those names. I think that's such a beautiful bond because I know that when I went to my first therapy session, it was not a person from my culture, but how kind they were in asking me those questions just made all the difference.
And I think that's a great point. That's something that I see in working with clients is they're willing to educate and share because you are curious and they do like to please, right? But at what point is it okay to kind of highlight that these traditions in this culture may be hindering?
We don't need to abandon our culture to build healthy love. We just need to update the script. So we are not adding any kind of problematic behavior, toxic behavior to the narrative because there's no need for that. Times have changed. And I tell my clients all the time because it's a heavy tech industry as well, right? South Asians. And like you have no problem updating your laptop, updating your iPhone or your Android, but so much problem updating your language and how you show love to your children, to your loved ones, how you kind of evolve in thought on how you consume the world. So in that emotional relational intelligence, I wish there was an iPhone upgrade to like get us back to that level. Jessica, my last question to you, and then we'll wrap up because you and I can talk about it forever, is what is something you can say as a person who's not from this community to create safety for them to reach out to you? And what they can say to a therapist who's not from the culture to set good expectations from what outcome they're looking for that is culturally informed?
That's a big question and I feel pressure. But I think at the end of the day, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I obviously am Hispanic. So I understand culture and I understand how culture shapes us because we love our culture, right? But I can love something, but also see that it's holding me back or that it is showing up in ways that may be unhelpful for me and how to I understand the idea of being loyal to your culture, but also allowing for newness too. Like I'm not being a bad Mexican by saying, hey, mom, I have my own life to live, right? Or I'm not being a bad Mexican by expecting my husband to do a little bit more than be a provider, right? So yeah,
I love that.
Understand that you can have culture, but still ask your culture to change and grow as you change and grow. I don't know if that made any sense at all.
Oh my God, that is so powerful. Asking the culture to also change with the times to support us so we can feel the joy because times are changing. Our needs are changing. How our parents were, we are not like that. How our children are, we are not like that. And noticing change and having that resilience is so important for us to be happy. Jessica, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I am excited to bring you back in a few months so you can ask more questions as hopefully you're going to see a lot more people from our community. Please remember to keep listening and watching as part of your weekly self-care and learning ritual. You know there are lots of commonalities in our lives, relationships, in our joys and struggles. And my hope is that this material will help you expand your perspective, give you some clarity on how to think about things, and ultimately make you feel better and sorted about your life and relationships. Hope you have a fulfilling and wholesome day.